Hi guys, this is Levi Stone. I will be presenting today on different attitudes and beliefs surrounding death in the South, particularly rural communities. I've grown up in a rural community and I've always noticed the way that people act and some things that we do here and there at funerals and such. And it's been really interesting looking into why we do some of the things we do. So I will tell you a little bit about it. When you think of a southern community, what comes to mind? If it's the plain small town USA with its Main Street soccer moms and rumor mill, that's probably about right. With this type of community comes its own unique social dynamics, which affect every part of life and all opinions, really, not excluding those about death. So, a few of the dynamics I'll be discussing are the close-knit communities. Everyone really knows everyone, probably by name, and so when a death occurs, it's felt by the entire community, not just the family. Also, as reported by the Pew Research Center, about 80% of Southerners claim a faith, with 76% of the total Southern population claiming Christianity. So religion plays a huge role in everything that goes on day to day, including attitudes about death. Also, the South has a disproportionate amount of people of lower socioeconomic status. So all of the existing health disparities are just amplified by the geographic isolation of rural communities. The first dynamic that I'll be discussing in depth is the tendency for our communities to be very close. To help illustrate this, I've included some popular sayings about small communities. The first is a song lyric that demonstrates how connected everyone is socially. It's true, most people even know each other by their first and last name. The second demonstrates the mindset of people in small communities, relying on each other for social networks and even economic opportunities. In researching small towns, I found an article written by Rebecca Morrill in Portland, Oregon. She was looking into how urban populations treat death, and mentioned how urban families tend to handle death privately. She said this might be contributable to the fact that urban communities do not have to rely on each other for much support or even community necessities. I believe this creates a very nice counter definition of rural communities. Like I mentioned earlier, death is a community affair, and support is never far away for the loved ones. Southern people also can rest assured knowing that a support system will be left behind for their own loved ones after they pass. I like to define religiosity as a measure of how interconnected one's religious practices are with their social life. In the Bible Belt, religion is a large part of everyday life, and people use it not only as a way to practice their faith, but also as a way to maintain a social network and establish their position in the community. There was an interesting study conducted looking at adolescent individuals and the relationship between their risk of suicide and rate of religiosity and commitment to religious ideals. They found that higher rates of religiosity corresponded to lower risks of suicide. This goes to show that religiosity is a large part of creating a strong sense of social connection and establishing religious ideals. There are many health disparities that exist between urban and rural populations. The South, which is largely rural, exhibits some of the highest rates of cardiovascular disease and even suicide rates, as we've learned. The ability to manage these chronic illnesses largely relies on the ability for those to access primary care physicians. As you can see here, about 25% of Americans live in a rural area, but only about 10% of physicians practice in a rural area. This is an obvious disparity in the ability to access primary care. This can affect opinions on death, veering them towards the inevitable or even the passive acceptance, which I will elaborate on further in a moment. After analyzing these important social dynamics, you can find 3 fundamental attitudes and beliefs about death in the South. The first is that death is experienced as a community. I know I've said this before, but it's very important to understand. Because of how close our communities are, and the interconnection between religious practices and social life, a social support system is always present. A single death affects the entire community, and so therefore, a death is experienced by the community. The second is that death is seen as the beginning of something more. Because religion is so important in everyday life, religious ideals carry the ideas of death. Yes, the tone of most funerals is very sad, but the message is of hope. All of the pain that is experienced in life is traded for something more peaceful after death. The socioeconomic and health disparities also contribute to this. These stressors leave people wishing for the better tomorrow and not fearing death as much as they normally would. The final belief is that death is passively accepted. This may be confusing at first, but I've mentioned it before. I believe that the socioeconomic and the health disparities, as well as the inability to access primary care physicians, produce stress in a person's life, and it causes someone to accept that they will die, and they take less interest in attending doctor's appointments or going through other measures to see that their illnesses are cured. This is supported by a study that was conducted that found that a farther distance from a primary care physician and poorer health behaviors led to people attending doctor's appointments less frequently. This may seem obvious, but it has a lot of important implications. This means that the inadequacies of our health system directly affect the sociological outlook on death, especially in rural communities. A few other very interesting findings from the study is that with increased religiosity and participation in religious practices, visits to the doctor went up. This could further point to the fact that increased religiosity means an increased sense of social connectedness, which stabilizes a community. But I digress. Using the fundamental attitudes and beliefs that we studied, we can analyze some of the common traditions that surround death in the South. First of all, pulling over to the side of the road when funeral processions pass by. Because death is such a community experience, this is a sign of shared sympathy. If a person doesn't know the person that actually died, it's almost guaranteed that they at least know a loved one. It's also a sign of respect in the context of religion. The person that is deceased has already completed the journey and is in their better tomorrow, meaning that they are to be greatly respected. Another common practice is for the friends and loved ones of the family to bring over a large amount of food following a death. This is a combined showing of the community involvement and the religiosity surrounding death, because most of the time it's the church family that brings the food. They're not just providing for the family in their time of need, but they're also acting as a support system for them in these dire times. So, these fundamental beliefs aren't just a mindset. Just like any other sociological factor, they drive the members of a rural community to behave a certain way, even participate in specific traditions surrounding death. Varying aspects of the rural society shape the behavior of the citizens. To recap, in a southern town, death is not just a private event, but something to be shared by the community. Death is also not just the end of life, but rather the beginning of a better time. Also, due to many health disparities, many Southerners
passively accept death as an inevitability, meaning that they play less of a role in preventing death. Thank you for your time in making this class so enjoyable. I've really enjoyed it.